Hello and welcome back, dear students. Today we start with our next chapter in history. We begin with lesson number 4, what books and burials tell us. So before we move with our lesson, let's just discuss the background of this lesson. So as we are studying about the ancient time period in class 6, in this chapter we would study about the Vedic period. So the Vedic period was divided into two different parts, the early Vedic period and the later Vedic period. In this lesson, we are going to focus more about our Vedic books, the different religious rituals. Then we also see about the words to describe different people, why were battles fought, and then story of megaliths and some important burial sites, and we'll focus more about an early village in Amgaon. So let's begin with our lesson. So now what is the meaning of Ved, or you call it as Vedas? So Ved is nothing else but knowledge, and these are the oldest scriptures of India. So these particular Ved or the scriptures, they were written in Vedic Sanskrit that differs a lot from the Sanskrit that we use today. They are considered to be Aporuseya, which means superhuman. These scriptures were written by the learned Brahmins in those times, or you can say by the sages who wrote on the basis of the experiences that they received in nature or they got from nature. The Ved are also called as Shruti, which means what is heard. So it is Shruti literature, whatever is heard, because the verses or the hymns or whatever teachings these books of Ved contain were taught by the priest to the children or to the student, syllable by syllable, word by word, with correct pronunciation. And then the students were made to recite and memorize all those hymns or verses of the or the teachings given in by the Ved. So earlier they were not in the written format. It was just passed by the gurus to their shishya through memorization, recitation, or we can say it was just a verbal kind of schooling. The students used to hear and grasp the things. So rarely these things were written during that particular time period. These Ved were then written down after many centuries. So even after they were composed or they were taught in the Gurukul system, they were not being written or printed on some paper or even on the leaves or bark of birch, but they were just memorized. So after centuries together, these compositions were written down, and also later as we invented with the printing processes, then now even we get the printed copies of these Ved. So one of the pictures of Gurukul system wherein the Guru Shishya would sit under the tree or near the Guru's hut, and then the Guru would impart the knowledge to the Shishyas verbally. You could see they are having certain kinds of scriptures in front of them. So this means by the time when this picture, the picture where it belongs, they were using certain barks of trees, or maybe a hard material like paper was invented. So it's that. So now let's focus about the Ved. You must have heard or read about these names somewhere. So there are four Ved in all. Rigved, then you have Yajurved, Samaved and Atharvaved. So the Rigved is one of the oldest composed Ved, which which was almost composed 3500 years ago. So as I said, the Rigved is the oldest Ved, composed almost about 3500 years ago. And what does it contain? So these Ved or the Rigved contains thousands of hymns which are known as suktas or well said. So which are in the praise of gods and goddesses. So whichever these suktas or these hymns which are in praise of gods and goddesses were also written in the Vedic Sanskrit. So it differs from what Sanskrit we learn today. And some of these hymns which are found in Rigveda are also in the form of dialogues. It also focuses on the important gods, the three important gods, which is Agni, the god of fire. Then we have Indra, the god of warrior or the warrior god we can say. And then Soma, it was a plant from which a special drink was prepared. So these three gods are given importance, especially in the Rigveda, and we have hymns or suktas related to these gods specifically. Now these hymns were composed by different sages or rishis or the priests, and most of the times the compositions and learning of these hymns were done by men, and women were not generally included in the composition or learning of this kind of a scripture. And as already mentioned earlier, these were passed to generations and generations by reciting and memorizing. So it was verbal learning, and even the priest would take utmost care for the pronunciation of the syllable, word, sentence, and so on. So most important was the correct pronunciation and then to memorize it. So it is not only that in the Gurukul system, the gurus would preach about the Rigved or the different Ved, but they would also teach some life skills to their students. So let's move. So now let's see how historians studied the Rigveda. So we all know that archaeologists are the people who study and find out about the past. Right? Even historians study the material that is given by an archaeologist. Right? So in addition to the material remains, they also check for the written sources as well. And so they have found out certain things about the remains from the Rigveda, and they've tried to study. So what did they find? So after studying those manuscripts of Rigveda, they came to know that Rigveda contains different hymns and which were in the form of dialogues. So one of the dialogue between Rishi Vishwamitra and the rivers Beas and Satluj are given to you in your textbook on page number 37. I would suggest that you read that dialogue. It's really a beautiful dialogue between the sage and the rivers, wherein Vishwamitra gives certain beautiful qualities to the river, as river is helpful for each and every person. And he also offers the prayers to the rivers, saying that let the chariots and cart cross the water safely. Do not raise your water above the axles so that we would cross safely. This is what he expects from the rivers. And yes, in turn, the rivers also listen to the prayers and says, you can cross safely. Our water won't rise above the axles of your carts or chariots. A beautiful dialogue. It's worth reading. So just follow the suggestion and please go through that particular topic from textbook page number 37. Yes. Then, even in those time periods, there were battles, wars were fought. But then, before that, let's see the prayers in the Rigveda were generally to bless the cattle and the horses because these were the important animals used by the people, maybe for battles and even for agricultural purposes. We know cattle is very important. And also, there are prayers, especially for the boy children, for their good health. As we know, the society in those days was male dominated, so there were special prayers for the boys. Coming to the battle, why was the battle fought? So the battles were fought to capture land, to capture even people who could work as slaves, even to say to capture the water bodies or to just have their own right on those rivers or lakes. And then after whatever was captured in the battles, most of the wealth was kept by the leaders. Some of it was given to the priests and the people around. Some wealth was used for performing the sacrifices, or what we call it as yajnas, in which offerings of ghee, grains, even animals were made to please gods and goddesses. Even these days we perform yajnas, but yes, we only offer ghee, grains, or some kind of seeds in that religious fire or the sacred fire. But then earlier people used to sacrifice even animals. Maybe they thought that sacrificing of animal would please gods and goddesses and our work would be easily done. So this was about battle. So you need to remember that cattle and horses were very important animals during those time periods. And then there were prayers for the good health of children, especially for boys in Rigveda. And it also mentions about the battles that were fought, why they were fought, and how was the wealth distributed. And as said earlier, the composition and learning of the Ved was the right of men usually. So here also the battles or wars which were fought, mostly men would participate in it. There were no armies as such because there were no kings or sultans or rulers like we hear in stories. But there were assemblies of people where people would meet together, discuss about some issues of maybe war or some issue, and then they would also discuss how to bring in peace. Yes, and who were the leaders here? The leaders were the experienced or skillful and powerful people from that particular area. So these leaders, or yes, these leaders, they did not have any kind of army, or they were not living in the luxurious palaces, but still they were the leaders because they had acquired better skills than the other people and they could take the responsibility of all the people residing in that area. So that is all from my side. I hope you have understood the topic. So you have to read textbook page number 35, 36 and 37, and on page 38 the first topic which says cattle, horses and chariots. I hope you will read the lesson. If any doubts, any queries, as usual, note it down It would be clear when we meet for our sessions. So till then, thank you, take care, have a nice day.